The wind was a high, thin scream, coming off the slick rock of the canyon walls. It promised a cold night and found every gap in the cabins chinking. Clara Reeves pushed her weight against the split rail fence post, tamping the dry Arizona dirt around its base with a heavy stone. The post was poplar, brittle and splintered, and it wobbled in the ground like a loose tooth. This was the third time in as many weeks the wind had tried to steal her fence. The fence was all that stood between her 3 scrawny hens and the coyotes that yipped and howled in the twilight. She jammed a sliver of wood deep under her fingernail and hissed, pulling her hand back. She stared at the bead of blood welling up, angry at her own softness. There was no time for it. She was 26 years old, and she was entirely alone. Her cabin sat perched on a hardscrabble claim at the mouth of a box canyon, 5 miles of bad trail from the cluster of buildings they called town. It was Martin's claim. Martin, her husband, dead now 8 weeks. She finished her work, her shoulders aching and her stomach hollow. The cold was setting in, chasing the memory of the weak afternoon sun. Inside the one-room cabin, the gloom was heavy. She stirred the embers in the hearth, adding 2 precious pieces of mesquite. The small fire did little to warm the room, but it gave light. She checked the pantry. The word felt too generous for the 3 shelves nailed to the wall. A tin of coffee, mostly grounds, a burlap sack of flour, so low she could see the bottom, 2 onions, papery and soft, a hard slab of salt pork, streaked with rust-colored salt. She cut a thin slice of the pork and set it in the skillet, the smell of sizzling fat filling the cabin. It was a lonely smell. Martin had been a loud man, a heavy man. His voice, his boot steps, his snoring, his anger, it had filled this cabin, this canyon, this world. Now there was only the wind, and the scratching of the hens, and the beat of her own blood in her ears. The townspeople in Prescott did not come out to the claim, not when Martin was alive, and certainly not now. She had seen them in town. 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Pruitt, the marshal's wife, turning her face away as Clara passed. Mr. Hatcher, at the mercantile, counting her coins twice as if he expected them to be stolen. She knew what they whispered. They said she was unnatural, a widow who did not weep. Martin had been a drunkard, abusive and coarse, but he had been one of them. She was an outsider, brought in from back east, quiet and pale. Some said she had killed him, that she had finally found the strength to push him when he stumbled near the well that night, his breath thick with whiskey. Others, their voices lower and coated with a different kind of action, whispered she had seduced him to death, that she had used up his heart with unnatural appetites. The truth was simpler. He had stumbled, drunk as usual, bellowing her name. He had caught his foot on the slick well stone, and he had fallen. She had stood there, watching the darkness swallow him. She had listened to the splash, and then the awful, wet quiet. She had not screamed. She had not run for the rope. She had stood there for a long time, listening to the wind. Then she had gone inside and bolted the door. She had not run for help. No one offered her help now. She ate the salt pork with a hunk of stale bread, her hunger a dull ache that never really left. She would have to go to town tomorrow. The flour was almost gone. She had $2 silver left, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. It would have to be enough. The next morning, she made the 5-mile walk, her burlap sack empty over her shoulder. The town was baked in the mid-morning sun, dust devils spinning down the main street. She avoided the saloon, keeping her eyes on the boardwalk planks, and slipped into Hatcher's mercantile. The bell above the door jangled. Mr. Hatcher looked up from his ledger, his expression souring. Mrs. Reeves. Mr. Hatcher, I need flour and salt. Got cash? I do. She placed the $2 silver on the worn counter. He eyed them, then slowly moved to the barrels. As he was scooping the flour, the saloon doors across the street swung open, spilling the sound of a tinny piano and rough laughter. 2 men came out, blinking in the bright light. Jedediah Sykes and Silas Croft. They worked for the Double R spread, and they had been Martin's drinking partners. Jed was a big, barrel-chested man with a beard stained by tobacco. Silas was smaller, wiry, with eyes that never seemed to blink. They saw her through the window. The bell jangled again, this time with force. The men filled the small store, bringing the smell of whiskey and unwashed bodies with them. "Well now," Jed slurred, planting himself between Clara and the door. "If it ain't the Black Widow herself. Come to spend poor Martin's money?" Clara looked at Mr. Hatcher. "My flower, please." Hatcher avoided her gaze, focusing on tying the sack. "She's too proud to talk to us." "Jed," Silas cackled, leaning against a pickle barrel. "Got that whole claim to herself now. Must get mighty lonely out there." "That's just what I was thinking," Jed said. He took a step closer to her. Clara could smell the sour mash on his breath. "A pretty young thing like you, all alone. It ain't right." "Excuse me," Clara said, her voice tight. She reached for the flour sack. Jed's hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. It was a heavy, hot grip. "No need to rush off. Clara, we're just being neighborly. Martin would have wanted us to look after his property." His thumb rubbed against the thin skin of her pulse. Bile rose in her throat. "Take your hand off me." "Or what?" Jed grinned. His teeth yellowed and broken. "You gonna push me down a well?" The store went silent. Even Mr. Hatcher froze, his hand halfway to the salt. Clara yanked her arm back, a sudden, violent motion that surprised them both. She grabbed her flour and the small sack of salt, threw them into her burlap sack, and pushed past Jed. He lunged for her, grabbing the sack. "Hold on now." She pulled, hard, and the seam of the burlap tore. Flour dusted the floorboards. "Look what you did," Silas snapped. Clara didn't wait. She bolted from the store, the bell clanging wildly behind her. "You'll be sorry," Jed roared from the doorway. "You can't hide out there forever." She did not run. She would not give them the satisfaction. She walked, fast, her head high, her back rigid. She did not look back, not once, all 5 miles home. She could feel their laughter, their eyes, burning into her spine. She reached the cabin as the sun began to bleed into the western rocks. She barred the door, a flimsy piece of wood that would not stop a determined man. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely light the lantern. She sat on her cot, the torn sack of flour in her lap. She had lost maybe a quarter of it. She closed her eyes, and the image of Jed's grin filled the darkness. She did not sleep. She sat in the wooden chair by the cold hearth, Martin's old 12-gauge shotgun across her knees. The wind howled, and the cabin groaned. Hours passed. It was sometime after midnight when she felt it, a change in the air. The hairs on her arms stood up. She was being watched. She froze, her grip tightening on the shotgun. She stared at the cabin's single window, a black square against the night. She scanned the tree line, barely visible in the faint starlight. Nothing. Just the swaying shadows of the juniper trees. But the feeling remained. It was a heavy, physical presence, pressing against the small cabin. She had felt animals watching her before. A bobcat on a high ridge, a coyote in the scrub. This was not an animal. This was a man. Her first thought was Jed, or Silas. They had come to follow through on their threat. Terror, cold and sharp, seized her. She raised the shotgun, the heavy barrels pointing toward the door. She waited. The clock on the mantel ticked, loud as a hammer blow. 1 minute, 5, 10, no sound, no bootstep, no scratching at the door. The presence did not move. It was just there, watching, waiting. Strangely, the terror began to ebb. It was replaced by something else she could not name. The presence did not feel like Jed. It did not feel drunk, or hateful, or greedy. It felt as patient as the stone, as watchful as the hawk. She found herself breathing more slowly. The watcher, whoever he was, had been out there when she arrived. He had likely seen her flight from town. He had seen her bar the door. And he had done nothing. She sat in that chair until the first gray light of dawn touched the canyon rim. When she looked again, the tree line was empty. The feeling was gone. She felt a strange, hollow relief and a bone-deep confusion. The day passed in a haze of fear. She did not tend the fence. She did not leave the cabin, except to feed the hens, the shotgun heavy in her arm. Every snap of a twig, every call of a bird, made her jump. She knew they would be back. Jed and Silas. They were not men who let a woman scorn them, not even a widow no one cared about. The sun was low in the sky when she realized she was almost out of firewood for the night. The pile by the cabin door was down to kindling. She could not, would not, freeze tonight. She took the shotgun and the axe, her eyes scanning the rocks above, the trees, the path. The watcher from last night was gone. She was sure of it. She was alone again. She set the shotgun against a large boulder, within easy reach, and began to split a dead log of juniper. The rhythmic crack of the axe biting into the wood was a comfort. It was work. It was normal. She was so focused on the task, on the sting of the cold air in her lungs, that she did not hear them. A boot crunched on gravel behind her. She spun, dropping the axe. Jed and Silas stood there, not 10 feet away. They were not smiling. They had been drinking again. "Told you couldn't hide," Jed said, his voice low. "Left your door open," Silas added, holding up her wooden door bar. "Just walked right in, but you wasn't there. Figured you was out here, making noise." Clara backed away, her eyes darting to the shotgun. It was too far. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just to be neighborly," Jed said, stepping forward. "You was rude in town. Clara, real rude. We came all this way to see if you'd apologize. I have no money." "We ain't here for money," Silas hissed, his small eyes gleaming. He moved to her left, flanking her. "We figure." Jed continued, walking slowly toward her. "You owe us, for the flour you spilled, for Martin's memory." He always shared what was his. He was backing her against the cabin wall. She felt the rough logs scrape her back. "Please," she begged, "don't." "It's too late for please," Jed said. He lunged, grabbing her. His arms were like steel bands, crushing her against him. She smelled the whiskey, the sweat, the filth. She screamed. She brought her knee up, hard. But he turned. Taking the blow on his thigh, he cursed and slammed her back against the wall, the impact knocking the breath from her. "Hold her!" he yelled. Silas grabbed her arms, pinning them. Jed fumbled with the front of her dress, his thick fingers tearing the worn cotton. Clara fought. She kicked. She spat. She screamed. But they were too strong. The canyon walls threw her screams back at her, hollow and useless. "Be still," Jed growled, and he struck her. His open palm cracked across her face, bright light exploding behind her eyes. Her head snapped back against the wood. Silas laughed. Jed pinned her body with his own, his knee forcing her legs apart. "This is how it is," he panted, his face close to hers. And then Silas stopped laughing. He made a sound, a wet, choked gurgle. His grip on her arms went slack. Jed looked up, confused. "Silas?" Clara, her vision blurry, saw Silas fall sideways, a dark shape at his back. A man stood where Silas had been. He had come from the trees, as silent as the shadows. He was Apache. He was tall, dressed in buckskin leggings and a simple linen shirt. His black hair was held back by a strip of cloth. He held a long knife, dark with Silas's blood. His face was hard, carved from the same red stone as the canyon, and his eyes were black and depthless. Jed stared, his mouth open. He scrambled back, letting go of Clara. She slid down the wall, gasping, clutching the torn front of her dress. "Injun," Jed breathed, his hand fumbling for the pistol at his belt. The Apache man did not wait. He moved with a speed that seemed impossible. He was not big like Jed, but he was fast, flowing over the ground like water. He closed the distance before Jed's gun was even clear of the holster. It was not a fight. It was a disposal. The Apache's hands shot out, grabbing Jed's gun hand, twisting it. Clara heard a sharp snap of bone. Jed howled, a high, thin sound. The pistol fell. The Apache drove the knife into Jed's side, under the ribs, a short, brutal, upward thrust. He pulled it free and shoved the big man away. Jed collapsed onto his knees, his hands clutching his bleeding side, his eyes wide with shock. The silence that fell was absolute. There was only the sound of Jed's ragged breathing and the wind. Clara was terrified. She pressed herself against the cabin, her whole body shaking, unable to move. She had been saved from one horror, only to be delivered to another. All the stories she had ever heard, of raids, of scalps, of torture, flooded her mind. The Apache man stood over the two fallen men. He wiped his blade clean on Silas's shirt. Silas was not moving. Jed was groaning, trying to crawl. Then the Apache turned. He looked at Clara. His gaze was steady. It held no malice, no lust. It held nothing but a cold, calm assessment. He saw her torn dress, the red mark blooming on her cheek, the terror in her eyes. He did not move toward her. He did not speak. He simply held her gaze for a long moment. He seemed to be as much a part of the landscape as the boulders and the wind. He was the man who had been watching. Clara stared back, her terror slowly, confusingly, giving way to something else. Awe. He had moved like a spirit. He had dispatched 2 armed men in seconds, and now he just looked at her, his strength a quiet, solid thing. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a greeting. It was an acknowledgement. Then he turned, and as silently as he had arrived, he vanished. He did not run. He walked, and the rocks and the juniper trees seemed to swallow him. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone. Clara stayed pressed against the wall for a long time, her heart hammering against her ribs. The canyon was quiet again, except for Jed Sykes, who was crawling away, leaving a dark trail in the dust. Silas Croft lay still, his eyes open to the sky. She looked at her attackers, then at the rocks where the Apache had disappeared. She was shaking, confused, and utterly, profoundly alive. It took Jed nearly an hour to drag himself onto his horse and ride away, slumped over the saddle. Clara watched him go from the window. She did not help him. She found Silas was not dead. He was breathing, shallowly, and the knife wound in his back was high, near the shoulder. The Apache had not killed them. He had simply stopped them. By the next day, the town was buzzing. Jedediah Sykes had ridden in, half dead, claiming a savage Apache had attacked him and Silas for no reason. A war party, he'd claimed. Marshal Brody rode out to Clara's claim. He was a grim, tired man who did not like complications. "Mrs. Reeves," he said, touching the brim of his hat. He looked at the bloodstain near her cabin wall. "Mr. Sykes tells a story about an Apache raid." Clara looked at the marshal. She thought of the whispers in town. She thought of Jed's hand on her, his threat, and she thought of the Apache's eyes, calm and assessing. If she told the truth, they would hunt him. A posse would ride into that canyon, and they would not stop until they found him. "I saw nothing," she said, her voice clear. Marshal Brody's eyes narrowed. "Nothing. Sykes and Croft were found on your land. I was inside." Clara lied, her heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. "I heard a commotion. By the time I came out, Mr. Sykes was crawling to his horse. Mr. Croft was where you found him." She pointed to the spot where Silas had lain before the marshal's men had carried him off. "It was dark. I saw no one." "You expect me to believe you saw nothing?" "I expect you to believe I am telling you what I saw," Clara said, meeting his gaze, which was 2 men, bleeding. "I suspect they got into a drunken fight over cards. Or a woman. It wouldn't be the first time." The marshal stared at her, a long, hard look. He knew she was lying, but he also knew the reputation of Jed and Silas, and he knew the town's reputation of Clara. It was a complication. "You stay armed, Mrs. Reeves," he said finally, turning his horse. "This is wild country. A lone woman—" He didn't finish. He just rode away. Clara bolted her door. She waited 2 days. The silence from the canyon was deep. There was no sign of the watcher, but she felt the pull of the rocks, the mystery of his presence. On the 3rd day, she took a canteen of water and walked, not toward town, but deeper into the canyon. She followed the dry creek bed, her eyes on the ground. She found them, faint but clear. The print of a moccasin, not a boot. She followed the tracks. They led her away from the path, up a narrow game trail that she had never noticed. It climbed the canyon wall, winding between massive boulders and thorny mesquite. It was a hidden path, one you would never see unless you knew it was there. The tracks led to a high crevice, a shallow cave carved into the sandstone cliff face, hidden by a curtain of ancient, hanging brush. She pushed the brush aside. He was there. He was sitting with his back to the stone wall, his legs drawn up. He had not heard her approach. His eyes were closed, his face tight with pain. His shirt was off, and a dirty rag was pressed to his side. It was dark with blood. He had been wounded, not by Jed or Silas. This was an older wound, perhaps 2 or 3 days old. A bullet graze, deep and raw. His eyes snapped open. In one fluid motion, his knife was in his hand. His body tensed to strike. Clara froze, her hands held up, palms out. "I am not," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't hurt you." He watched her. His black eyes narrowed, his breathing harsh. He was wary, like a wolf in a trap. "You saved me," she whispered. He said nothing. His gaze flickered from her face to her hands. "You're hurt." She took a cautious step forward. He tensed, the knife glinting. "I saw, from the fight, you weren't hit." He just watched. She remembered the bandage in her pocket. She had been mending her dress and had a clean strip of linen. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled it out. It was white and clean. She held it out to him. "For the wound," she said. They stayed like that for a full minute. The silent Apache, bleeding in his hidden cave, and the lonely widow, offering the only help she had. The silence stretched, filled only by the wind moving through the brush at the cave mouth. He stared at the white cloth. Then, slowly, his gaze lifted to her face. He studied her, his eyes searching for something. His hand, the one not holding the knife, moved. He reached out, his fingers brushing the linen. He did not take it. Not yet. He was deciding. Clara kept her hand steady, though her heart felt like it would break through her ribs. Finally, his fingers closed around the bandage. His touch was rough, his skin calloused, but his movement was gentle. He took the cloth. He did not thank her. He did not speak. He merely nodded. Once. A slow acknowledgement. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The silence between them, there in the high crevice, was heavy. But it was not the empty, cold silence of her cabin. It was something else. It was a beginning. She came back the next day, near noon. The sun was high and hot, beating down on the red rocks. Clara carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She had walked the 5 miles from her cabin, her steps sure, purposeful. She did not know what she was doing, only that she had to. He was in the crevice, his back against the stone, where she had left him. The new bandage she had given him was stark white against his dark skin. He had been watching the canyon, but his head turned as she approached, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. He was wary, his body tense. She stopped at the mouth of the cave, not daring to enter without invitation. He did not give one. "I brought food," she said, her voice quiet. She unwrapped the bundle. She had almost no food herself, but she had brought what she had: a heel of stale bread, a thick slice of salt pork, and a small tin of coffee. He looked at the offering, then at her. His eyes were searching, hard. He did not understand this. White people did not give food to Apache. They gave bullets, or poison, or blankets thick with sickness. Clara set the bundle down on a flat rock just inside the cave, then stepped back. He watched her, unmoving, for a full minute. Finally, he reached for the bread. He tore a piece and ate it, chewing slowly, his gaze never leaving her. He did not thank her. He did not need to. His acceptance was enough. She pointed to the bandage on his side. "It is from a bullet." He nodded once. "A soldier's bullet." "How long?" "4 days," he said. His voice was low, rough, as if he rarely used it. She knew she should leave. She knew she should be afraid. This man was a fugitive. He had wounded 2 townsmen, even if they deserved it. But she stayed. She sat on a rock near the entrance, in the shade, and watched the hawks circle in the hot sky. He watched her. The silence was thick, but it was not empty. She had to go to town 2 days later. Her flour was gone. The burlap sack empty from her panicked flight from Jed and Silas. She dreaded it. She dreaded the eyes, the whispers. When she walked into Hatcher's Mercantile, the bell jangling loud in the quiet store, all motion stopped. Mr. Hatcher, who was measuring beans, paused. Mrs. Pruitt, the marshal's wife, turned from a bolt of calico, her face a mask of pinched judgment. "Mrs. Reeves," Hatcher said. His tone was cold. "I need flour, Mr. Hatcher, and shot for my scattergun." "We heard about the trouble at your claim," Mrs. Pruitt said, her voice thin. "We heard Jed Sykes and Silas Croft were injured." "They were," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. She placed her last coins on the counter. "Jed says it was an Apache, a buck, that he attacked them for no reason." Clara met her gaze. "I told the marshal. I was inside. I saw nothing. I suspect they got into a drunken fight." Mrs. Pruitt's eyes narrowed. "That is not what Jed says, and I have been told. You have been seen, walking. I walk," Clara said simply. "Not toward town. You walk toward the canyons, toward the high rocks." Mrs. Pruitt took a step closer. "It is not proper. Clara, a widow, wandering in the wilderness. Especially now. It invites talk." The implied question hung in the air. "Are you meeting someone? Are you the reason for the attack?" Clara felt a flush of anger, hot and sudden, but she banked it. She needed the flour. She needed the lie. "Martin, my husband," she said, the name tasting like rust. "He liked to hunt up there. It was his favorite trail. I go to remember him, to be close to his memory." The lie was ugly, but it worked. Mrs. Pruitt's suspicion faltered, replaced by a look of pity, which was almost worse. "Grieving is one thing, child," she said, softening. "But that is Apache land. You are tempting fate. You stay close to home." Clara took her flour and shot, nodded, and walked out. The secret felt like a heavy stone inside her, a weight that was hers alone. She returned to the canyon that afternoon. He was not in the cave. A cold panic seized her. He was gone. Of course he was gone. He was a wild thing. She should have known. She turned to leave, her disappointment a sharp ache. Then she saw him. He was standing on a high ledge, 50 feet above the cave, motionless, watching the trail that led to town. He had seen her coming long before she had seen him. He climbed down, his movements fluid and silent, landing on the path without a sound. She held out the bag of flour. "I brought this, and I have a needle. I can mend your shirt. It is torn." He looked at the bag, then at her. His wariness was still there, but it was tempered with curiosity. He did not understand her. He pulled off the linen shirt. It was stiff with old blood and torn where the bullet had grazed him. She sat on her rock and took out her needle and thread. He sat across from her, his back to the cave wall, his knife in his hand, cleaning his fingernails. He was watching her, but his thoughts were far away. His mind was on the past. He saw the blue coats of the soldiers. He remembered their leader, a man with yellow hair, who had offered them blankets in the winter, blankets that carried the pox. He saw the faces of the men in his band who had trusted him. He saw his father, strong and proud, cough his life out. He saw the betrayal that cut even deeper. His brother, Cale. Cale had seen the sickness, seen the lies, and his heart had turned to iron. He had abandoned the Apache ways of balance and joined a raiding party, fueled by whiskey and a thirst for vengeance that matched the white man's. Cale now rode with outlaws, taking scalps, believing all whites were the enemy. Taza was caught between. He despised the white man's world for its endless, smiling deceit. He mourned his brother for letting that deceit turn him into a monster. He trusted no one, and now, a white woman sat 3 feet away, mending his shirt. Her head was bowed, her hair the color of corn silk. Her hands were steady as she stitched the torn cloth. She was a puzzle. She was an enemy, but she did not act like one. She was wounded, like him. The sky had been a flat, hazy gray all day. The air was wrong. It was still hot and heavy. Clara finished her stitching and held up the shirt. "It is done," she said. As he reached for it, the wind changed. It did not rise slowly. It hit the canyon like a solid thing, a roaring, physical blow. The air turned from gray to a sick, churning yellow. "Sandstorm," he said, his voice sharp. Clara jumped to her feet, her eyes wide with fear. "My cabin." "You will not make it." He grabbed her arm. "Inside, now." She stumbled into the cave just as the world outside vanished. The wind screamed, a high-pitched, inhuman sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was not dark, but a terrifying, opaque brown. Sand and grit blasted the entrance of the cave, piling in drifts. Clara pressed herself against the back wall, her hands over her ears. She was terrified. The sound was overwhelming. It felt like the mountain itself was coming apart. Taza sat near the entrance, his coat pulled over his head, a still, dark shape against the roaring chaos. He was patient. He was used to this. He was part of the stone, part of the wind. It lasted for hours. It felt like days. They were trapped together in the roaring, dust-filled darkness. When the wind finally began to die, the silence was jarring. The air in the cave was thick with fine, choking dust. The sun was gone, obliterated. Taza moved, shaking the dust from his coat. He struck a flint and sparked a small, smokeless fire in a ring of stones Clara had not noticed before. The small flame pushed back the gloom. Clara coughed, her throat raw. "You are not hurt," he stated. It was not a question. "No, I did not know it could be like that. The desert wind," he said. "It cleans the world, makes it new." They sat in the quiet. The storm had forced an intimacy. There was no escape. They were two people, breathing the same dusty air, lit by the same small fire. "Why?" Clara asked, her voice raspy. "Why did you help me, with Jed and Silas?" Taza stared into the fire. He remembered the look on Jed's face, the way he had held her, the way he had torn her dress. "They were animals," he said, his voice low. "A man who takes what is not given, who finds joy in fear. He is not a man, he is a sickness. They think you are the animal," Clara said softly. "The savage." He looked at her, his black eyes holding no pity, only fact. "I know." The quiet stretched again, but it was filled with the things they were not saying, the shared isolation, the brand of other that both of them wore. The terror of the storm, combined with the memory of Jed's attack, had loosened something in Clara, a secret she had held so long it felt like part of her bones. "My husband," she said, the words tasting like ash. "Martin, he was like them." Taza's gaze flickered to her face. He did not speak. He waited. "He did not hit me at first," she whispered, staring at her own hands. "At first, he just yelled. He said I was barren, that I was a poor wife, that I was cold. He drank more every month." She was trembling, but she could not stop. The words needed to come out. "Then he started to hit me. When he was drunk, when his cards went bad, when the crops failed. It was always my fault." Taza watched her, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes were listening. "The night he died," she said, her voice dropping so low he had to lean to hear her. "He was drunk, very drunk. He was bellowing. He found me by the well. He said he would. He would teach me a lesson. She stopped, swallowing. He stumbled. He was always stumbling. He caught his foot on the well stone, and he fell in. Clara looked up, her eyes wide, boring into his. I heard him. I heard the splash. It was so dark. And then he called my name. Just once. Clara. She was crying now, silent tears tracking through the dust on her face. The rope was right there. I had it in my hand. I could have thrown it. She took a ragged breath. I did not. I stood there. I held the rope, and I listened to him die. And, God forgive me, I was glad. I was glad he was gone. She hid her face in her knees, waiting for the judgment. Waiting for him to call her a murderer, a cold-hearted witch, just as the townsfolk whispered. He was silent for a long time. The only sound was the soft hiss of the fire and Clara's muffled sobs. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, devoid of emotion. My wife. Clara's head snapped up. Her name was Ilya. She was small. She knew how to laugh. She could find water where there was none. She knew the songs for the corn. He stared past Clara, into the memory. The soldiers moved us. They said it was a new land, a reservation, near the Gila River. It was a bad place. The ground was sick. His face hardened, the muscles in his jaw clenching. It was the sickness, the smallpox. It came in the blankets they gave us, the white man's gift. He spoke as if reciting a catechism of hell. It took the children first, then the old ones, then Ilya. She burned, her skin. I held her. I put wet cloths on her. But it was too fast. He paused, his breath catching. Just once. The soldier doctor. The one at the camp. He knew. They all knew. They knew the blankets carried the sickness. They did not warn us. They watched us die. They said it was God's will. That it was cleaning the land for them. He turned his head and looked at her. His black eyes were bottomless, filled with a loss so profound it had burned all emotion away, leaving only a cold, hard truth. You did not throw the rope, he said. They did not give us a rope. We are the same. The storm passed. The dust settled. Night fell, deep and heavy. A new sound began, the gentle patter of rain on the stone outside, washing the world clean. Then, far off, thunder rolled, a low growl that shook the earth. Taza added a few more sticks to the fire. The small cave was filled with a flickering, orange light. Clara sat, her knees drawn up, her shawl wrapped tight around her. She was trembling. You are cold, Taza observed. She shook her head, her eyes fixed on the flames. No, not cold. With each distant crash of thunder, her body flinched. The confession had stripped her bare. She felt raw, exposed. The small, enclosed space, the heat from the fire, the presence of this man beside her. It was all confusing. He sat near her, not touching, but close. She could feel the heat from his body. He smelled of smoke and pine and the clean dust of the desert. He did not smell of whiskey. He did not smell of hate. I am scared, she whispered, the words pulled from her. The thunder? No. She looked at her hands, which were clenched in her lap. Martin, when he touched me, it was not gentle. It was a chore. It was his right. He hurt me. He did not care. He just took. She looked up at Taza, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He broke something. In here. She touched her chest. I do not know if it can be mended. Taza said nothing. He simply watched her. His stillness was profound. It was not a lack of interest. It was a presence. He was listening, not just with his ears, but with his whole body. He did not judge. He did not offer solutions. He just was. I am scared, she confessed again, her voice breaking. I am so scared to be touched again. I am scared that it will always hurt. That I will always be broken. She took a shaky breath. The vulnerability of physical pain. And I am scared of never being touched, with gentleness. I am scared I will live in that cabin until I am an old woman, and I will. I will have never known it, not once. The silence in the cave was absolute, heavier than the mountain. The air was charged, aching with her confession. He was the only person on earth who knew her truths. He held her gaze. He saw the fear. He saw the pain. And he saw the flicker of need, the fragile hope that she herself was afraid to name. He did not move. He did not reach for her. He did not turn away. His patience, his stillness, was its own kind of strength. It was that strength that made her lean forward, just an inch, her voice a thread of sound, a prayer in the darkness. "Will it hurt?" she whispered. Or will you go slow?" It was the question of her life. It was not just about her body. It was about her soul. Taza's answer did not come in words. Not at first. He slowly, deliberately, lifted his hand. He did not reach for her face or her shoulder. He moved his hand toward her, where her own was clenched tight, white-knuckled, in her lap, with one finger. He gently, slowly, brushed the skin of her wrist. It was the lightest touch she had ever known. It was not a grip. It was not a demand. It was a question. It was a promise. Back and forth, a simple, reverent motion. A single tear rolled down her cheek and dropped onto his hand. She did not pull away. He held her gaze, his eyes dark, fierce, and filled with a vow she had never seen. He leaned in, his voice low, a promise spoken into the sacred. Rain-washed silence between them. "Nothing in you," he said, "will break tonight." His promise, nothing in you will break tonight, settled in the small, rain-washed cave. It was a vow that held the dawn at bay. Clara did not sleep. Not at first. She watched the fire die to embers, her mind replaying his words, his touch. He had not moved toward her. He had given his word, and then he had returned to his own side of the small fire, wrapped himself in his blanket, and respected the space between them. He had left the choice, the world, to her. She must have slept, because she awoke to the gray light of morning. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp, smelling of whetstone and juniper. She was stiff, cold, and her hands, scraped raw from her fall in the firewood, throbbed. Taza was already awake. He was not in the cave. A small flicker of her old panic returned, the fear of abandonment. Then she saw him, standing at the cave mouth, simply watching the sun clear the eastern canyon rim. He held a small water skin. He turned when he heard her stir. His face was unreadable in the morning light. He did not smile. He simply walked to her and offered the skin. She drank. The water was cold and clean. "Your hands," he said. He gestured to where she held them in her lap, the knuckles bloody and caked with dirt from the storm. She looked at them, ashamed of their weakness. "It is nothing. From the wood." He shook his head. He went to the back of the cave and returned with a small, shallow bowl carved from soapstone and a clean piece of linen. He poured water from the skin into the bowl. He knelt before her, not as a supplicant, but as a man doing a necessary task. "Give them to me." She hesitated. Her hands were ugly, scarred from work, trembling. Martin had always said her hands were useless, too soft for this land. She slowly extended them. He took them. His grip was not a grip at all. It was a holding. His palms were rough, calloused, but his touch was so gentle it made her want to weep. He dipped the linen in the water and began to wash the grit from her knuckles. He did not scrub. He bathed them. He cleaned the dirt from beneath her nails. He was slow, methodical, his focus entirely on the task, as if he were tending to something sacred. It will scar," she whispered, her voice thick. "Scars are a map," he said, not looking up. "They tell where you have been, not where you will go." When he was finished, he unbound the bandage on his own side. The wound was angry, the linen she had given him stiff with dried blood. "Let me," she said, her voice stronger. She took the bowl and the cloth. It was her turn. She knelt and began to clean the bullet graze. It was a deep, raw thing, a long, hot line of torn flesh. As she worked, her fingers brushed his skin. It was warm, alive. She felt the hard muscle beneath. Her eyes traveled. This was not his only scar. An old, puckered circle on his shoulder looked like a bullet hole from long ago. A thin, white line curved around his ribs. The mark of a knife. He was a map of violence. She finished cleaning the new wound and tore a strip from her own petticoat. Clean and white, to bind it. Her fingers lingered on the old knife scar. Without thinking, she traced it. He flinched, not in pain, but in memory. His whole body tensed. She pulled her hand back. "I am sorry." He caught her wrist. His eyes held hers. He did not speak, but he took her hand and placed it back on the scar, holding it there. He was letting her in. He was showing her his own broken places. They stayed like that for a long time. The silence filled with the drip of water from the rocks outside. That night, they slept. He laid his bedroll close to hers. The terror of the night before, of Jed, of Martin, returned to her in the darkness. She trembled, a small, involuntary shiver. She felt him move. He did not try to hold her. He simply extended his arm, his hand resting on the ground between them, palm up, an offering. She hesitated for only a second. She moved, turning onto her side, and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. A warm, solid presence in the dark. She slept. She woke to a feeling she had never known. Safety. She was in his arms. Sometime in the night, the space between them had closed. Her head was on his shoulder. His arm was heavy and warm across her waist, and his breathing was a slow, steady rhythm against her ear. He was asleep. She lay perfectly still, terrified of breaking the spell. She had never felt this, not in her father's house, not in her marriage. Martin had used her bed, but he had never shared it. This man, this stranger, this savage, held her as if she were a part of him. Then the other fear came, cold and sharp. What had she done? She was lying in the arms of an Apache, a fugitive, a man hunted by the town, a man who had bled other men. She thought of Mrs. Pruitt's face, of the whispers. She was beyond lost. She was damned. He stirred, his grip tightening for a moment in his sleep, pulling her closer. She closed her eyes. She felt safer in this cave with a hunted man than she had ever felt in her own cabin. She was terrified of what it meant. She was terrified of how much she did not want to move. She stayed for 2 more days. The wound on his side began to close. They spoke little, but the silence was different now. It was full. He taught her the name of the red-tailed hawk that hunted the canyon. She taught him the English word for the skillet she had brought, filled with the last of her coffee. But the flour was gone. The salt pork was gone. She had to go back. "I must," she told him, standing at the cave mouth. "I need supplies. I cannot stay here forever." He looked at her, his face grim. "They will be watching. The men you lied to, they will not believe you." "I will be careful," she said. He did not believe her, but he nodded. "Go in the light. Do not stay past noon." The walk back to the town was a lonely one. The 5 miles of trail seemed barren, hostile. The world she had lived in for 3 years now looked alien. She saw the first sign of it before she even reached the main street. Mr. Hatcher, the mercantile owner, was driving his wagon out of town. He saw her walking the path. His face, usually just sour, hardened into disgust. He spat a wad of tobacco into the dust at her feet and drove his team on without a word. A cold dread settled in her stomach. When she turned onto the main street, it was as if she had the plague. The town was busy. It was mid-morning, but everywhere she walked, conversation stopped. 2 women, hurrying into the dressmaker's shop, crossed the street to avoid her. Mrs. Pruitt was standing outside the marshal's office. She saw Clara and her face became a mask of pure, righteous hatred. The saloon doors swung open. Jed Sykes emerged, his right arm in a dirty sling, his face bruised and swollen. He was flanked by 3 other ranch hands. "There she is," he roared, pointing at her. "The Injun's whore." The street went silent. Every eye turned to Clara. "That's the one!" Jed yelled, his voice thick with rage and whiskey. "She's been hiding him. She's been feeding him, lying for him." Clara froze, her heart hammering. "Mrs. Reeves." It was the preacher, Reverend Gale, stepping out of the mercantile. His face was pale, his eyes burning. "Is this true? Have you been consorting with the savage who attacked these men?" "He attacked me," Clara said, her voice trembling but clear. "Jed and Silas, they attacked me. He saved me." "A lie," Jed bellowed. "She's been shacked up with him in the canyons. I saw her tracks, seen her taking him food. She's no better than a savage herself." A group of men began to gather. They were not just the saloon loafers. They were townsmen, the blacksmith, Mr. Abernathy, the stable master, men with families. Their faces were hard, closed. "This is a decent town, Mrs. Reeves," the preacher said, his voice rising. "We will not abide a Jezebel who brings heathen blood into our midst. We are forming a committee, a vigilance committee, to cleanse this territory." "You are damned, Mrs." Pruitt hissed from the boardwalk. "Damned in the eyes of God and man." Clara looked at their faces. There was no help here, no law. She was utterly, completely alone. She turned and ran. She did not bother with the store. She did not bother with the flour. She just ran, her skirts hiked up, kicking up dust as she fled the town. She heard their laughter, their jeers, following her. She ran the whole 5 miles. She did not slow until she reached the path to her cabin, her lungs burning. She stumbled to a halt. The door was gone. It was not just open. It was torn from its hinges, lying splintered in the dirt. "No," she whispered. She stepped inside, and her world fell apart. It was a violation. They had been thorough. Her cot was slashed, the ticking scattered like snow. Her small wooden table was overturned. The pantry shelves were broken, the floor littered with smashed jars. Her mother's tintype photograph, the only thing she had from her old life, was stomped into the floorboards. The glass shattered, but it was the wall that held her. The wall above where her bed had been. In thick, black axle grease, they had written one word: "Whore." Clara sank to her knees. This was not a warning. This was an exorcism. They had cast her out. The cabin was not her home. It was her tomb. She had no home. She stayed there, kneeling, for almost an hour. The shock gave way to a cold, hard clarity. They had taken everything: her name, her safety, her past. She stood up. She walked to the hearth, where a loose stone hid Martin's old box. She pulled it out. Inside was a handful of coins and a box of shotgun shells. She took them. She took the shotgun from the wall. She took her last canteen. She did not look back. She walked away from the cabin, from the name Clara Reeves. And she did not stop until she reached the hidden path to the canyon. He was waiting for her. He had seen her coming. He saw her face, streaked with tears and dust. He saw the shotgun in her hand. He saw the terrible, broken emptiness in her eyes. She did not have to speak. He knew. They, she stammered, holding out her hands, which were stained with the axle grease from where she had touched the wall. "They broke it, everything." He looked at her hands, then at her face. He said nothing. He simply stepped aside, holding back the brush at the mouth of the cave. It was the only invitation she needed. She ducked inside. She dropped the shotgun, and she began to weep. Not the silent, grieving tears of before, but the raw, tearing sobs of a woman who had lost her world. He let her. He sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. His presence a solid, silent wall against the outside world. She hid in the canyon. The days bled into a week. The terror of the town faded, replaced by the sharp, clear reality of survival. Taza's cave became her world. He taught her. He had to. "You are not a white woman now," he told her, his voice flat. "They will not treat you as one. You are one of us. You are Apache. You must learn." He taught her how to set a snare. Her hands, which he had bathed, grew calloused and sure. She watched him, mimicking his quick, deft movements, setting the loops of sinew just so. hidden in the brush. He taught her how to hunt, not with her loud shotgun. He gave her a bow. It was small, but powerful. Her arms ached from pulling it. "Do not aim," he said. "Look, see the rabbit? See where it will be? Breathe and let go." Her first shot missed by a yard. Her 10th hit the dirt. Her 20th caught a rabbit in the thigh. She had to kill it with a knife. She cried, but she did it. They ate that night. He taught her to listen. They would sit on the high ridge, not speaking for an hour. "What do you hear?" he would ask. "The wind," she said. "What is the wind saying?" "It's just wind." "No," he said, closing his eyes. "It carries the smell of iron. From the town, it carries the sound of shod horses. 3 of them, on the main trail. They are not coming here. They are riding south." She learned to listen. She learned to smell the world. She learned to make fire, not with a match, but with a drill, spinning the stick between her palms until her hands were raw. When she finally got a spark, a tiny, glowing ember in the dry tinder, she felt a surge of pride that was fierce and new. She was changing. The soft, pale, frightened widow was being burned away, leaving something harder, quieter, and stronger. One night, they sat by the fire, eating the rabbit she had snared and skinned herself. They had worked all day, reinforcing the high walls of the cave with stones, making a defensible position. They were a team. She watched him. He was carving, finishing a new hook for a snare. The firelight played on the hard planes of his face, the blackness of his hair. She felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. It was a deep, aching tenderness. She reached out and touched his cheek. He froze, the knife still in his hand. He turned his head slowly, looking at her. His eyes were dark, questioning. This was new. She had never, in all these weeks, initiated a touch. She did not pull her hand away. "Taza," she whispered. He put the knife down. He looked at her hand on his face, then back to her eyes. He saw the fear was gone. He saw the bruises on her soul, the ones he shared, and he saw something else, a desire that was as clean and clear as the desert air. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a rush of passion. It was slow. It was a question. His lips were dry, firm. It was a kiss of smoke and dust and pine. It was the first real kiss of her life. He pulled back, watching her. She leaned in and kissed him back. This time, it deepened. His hand came up to her hair, his fingers tangling in the strands that had come loose from her braid. He pulled her gently closer. There was no tearing of clothes. There was no violence. There was only a slow, careful, human discovery. He laid her back on the blankets, his body covering hers, but he held his weight on his arms, watching her face, always watching her eyes. He was listening to her breathing, to the silent messages of her body. It was not perfect. It was hesitant. It was awkward. It was real. And when he finally joined with her, she gasped. Not in pain, but in a sudden, shocking flood of pure sensation. He was slow, just as he had promised. He moved with a reverence, a patience, that unraveled her. He was mapping her body as he had taught her to map the canyon. He was giving, not taking. When it was over, they lay tangled, slick with sweat, the fire burning low. Clara was completely, profoundly still. She felt whole. The broken places inside her felt as if they had been carefully, tenderly, stitched back together. Taza held her, his heart hammering against her back. He felt her shoulder begin to shake, a small, silent tremor. He tensed, pulling away to look at her. "I hurt you." His voice was rough, accusing himself. I was not." She turned, her face wet with tears. She put her fingers to his lips. "No," she whispered. "No, you did not hurt me. It did not hurt." She was weeping, deep, shuddering sobs that came from a place so deep inside her she had not known it existed. It was the release of years, the pain of Martin, the shame of the town, the terror of her life, and the overwhelming, crushing, beautiful shock of being touched with love. She cried into his chest, clutching him. He held her. He rocked her. "Shh, it is good," he whispered, his own voice cracking. "It is good to cry. It is like the rain. It washes the stone." He held her tightly, his eyes squeezed shut, his face buried in her hair. "You are not weak," he choked out, his own loss, his own pain for Ilya, for his brother, rising in his throat. "You are strong. You are strong." They held each other, two weeping survivors, alone in the high dark. The peace lasted 3 more days. It was a stolen, a fragile thing. Taza grew restless. He spent less time in the cave, more time on the high ridges, watching the trails. He was a scout. He could read the signs. He came back at dusk. Clara was tending the fire, roasting 2 small birds she had shot with a bow. She looked up, smiling. The smile died when she saw his face. It was granite. "What is it?" "They are coming," he said. He did not waste words. "How do you know?" "Smoke, not camp smoke. Angry smoke. They burned your cabin." Clara's heart stopped. "All of it? All of it. And they ride 6 of them. They are searching the canyons now. They are led by the one with the broken arm, Jed Sykes." Taza was already moving. He grabbed a water skin, a bag of dried meat. He checked his knife, his bow. "You must go," he said, his voice hard. "Urgent." "Go where?" "West, over the ridge. Follow the dry wash until you reach the Bradshaw Mountains. There is a stage stop on the other side, Hasayampa. You can get a ride to California. You will be safe." He thrust the bag of supplies at her. "They know you are out here. They will find this place. If they find you with me, they will show no mercy." Clara looked at the bag. She looked at his face, tight with a fear that was not for himself. She remembered the cabin, the word whore. She remembered the faces of the women in town. She remembered the cold, empty years with Martin. She looked at the blankets where they had lain, the fire she had built. She shook her head. "Clara," he urged, grabbing her arms. "You do not understand. These men are not soldiers. They are rabid. They will kill me, but they will keep you. They will hurt you in ways you cannot imagine." "I understand," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was not the voice of the widow. It was the voice of the woman who had learned to hunt. She dropped the bag of supplies. "No, you must. I can lead them away. But you must run." She stepped forward, close to him, and put her hands on his chest. Her hands were steady. "I was dead," she said, her voice low, fierce. "In that cabin. I was dead. In that town. I was dead. I am alive here. With you." She looked him in the eye, her gaze unflinching, her entire future narrowing to this one single point. "I will not run. I won't live if I leave you." Taza looked at her, and the argument died in his throat. The woman who had trembled at the sound of the wind in her cabin was gone. In her place was this person, her eyes clear and hard, her hands steady on his chest. He had seen this look before, in warriors facing their last fight. It was a look that did not know how to retreat. He nodded. Once. The decision was made. There was no more time for words. "Then we move," he said. His voice was low, urgent. "Not west. They will expect that. We go north, into the high country. My people called it the Broken Land." He moved with a speed that was all economy. He gathered their few belongings, the bow, the quiver of arrows, the shotgun and the half-full box of shells, 2 water skins, now mostly empty, the 2 blankets, his knife. She took the supplies, meager as they were, and tied them in a roll. "They burned the cabin," he said, his back to her as he scattered the ashes of their fire, covering the spot with stones. "They are angry. They will not be careful. They will be loud. We will be silent." He led her from the cave, not back down the hidden path, but up. He moved to a crack in the canyon wall she had thought was just a shadow. It was a chimney, a vertical climb, with handholds and footholds worn into the stone by centuries of Apache use. "I will go first," he said. Place your feet where I place mine. Do not look down. She nodded. Her ankle, still tender, protested. But she ignored the pain. She focused only on his body above her, the sure, silent placement of his hands, the flex of his muscles as he climbed. She followed. It was a terrifying, lung-burning ascent. When she reached the top, he was there, his hand reaching down, his grip like iron, hauling her onto the flat, open mesa. The world looked different from up here. The moon was a pale sliver, casting a weak, silvery light over a vast expanse of scrub and rock. They were exposed. We run, he said. He set a hard pace, a ground-eating trot that was more endurance than speed. He led her across the hard pan, avoiding patches of soft dirt that would betray their tracks. He moved like a shadow, his moccasins making almost no sound. Clara, in her sturdy boots, felt loud, clumsy. Her lungs burned. The shotgun, which she carried, grew heavier with every mile, but she did not falter. She kept her eyes on the dark shape of his back, and she ran. They ran for hours. The sky in the east was just beginning to pale, from black to a deep, bruised purple when they reached the river. It was not wide, but it was fast. A dark, churning ribbon of water swollen with snowmelt from the mountains. We must cross, Taza said, not pausing. The water will wash our trail. They will lose time here. He plunged in. The water was a shock, a living, icy thing that stole her breath. It surged around her waist, the current pulling at her heavy skirts, trying to drag her downstream. The rocks underfoot were round and slick with algae. She was halfway across when her boot slipped. The current, which had been pulling at her, now owned her. She was swept off her feet. A cry choked off as the frigid water closed over her head. She swallowed, her throat filling with a muddy, icy taste. A sharp, cracking pain exploded in her left leg as it slammed into a submerged boulder. She surfaced, gasping, flailing. Taza was on her in an instant. He had not been swept away. He seemed to be rooted to the riverbed. He grabbed the front of her shirt in one hand, his grip bunching the fabric, and hauled her against the current. He was impossibly strong. He half dragged, half carried her, his own body a bulwark against the river's force, until they stumbled onto the far bank. Clara collapsed onto the wet gravel, coughing up water, shivering so violently her teeth rattled. I am all right, she gasped, pushing her wet hair from her face. He was kneeling beside her, his face a mask of concern. You are hurt. No, just cold. She tried to stand. The moment she put weight on her left foot, a white-hot spike of agony shot from her ankle to her knee. She cried out, a sharp, broken sound, and fell back. Taza's hands were on her leg, his touch firm but surprisingly gentle. He ran his fingers along the bone. She hissed when he reached her ankle. He looked up, his face grim in the pale dawn light. It is not broken, but the joint is badly sprained. You cannot walk on it. I have to, she said, her voice tight with panic. Taza, they are coming. You must leave me. You can travel faster. I will hide. I will slow you down. He looked at her as if she had spoken nonsense, a language he could not comprehend. Leave you? He shook his head, a short, sharp motion. The Apache do not leave their own. You are my woman. I do not leave my own body behind. He stood, turned his back to her, and knelt. Come. What? No, I am too heavy. You cannot carry me, not with the supplies. Get on, he commanded. His voice was not harsh, but it was absolute. It was the voice of a man who would not be argued with. Shamed by her weakness, but trembling with cold and pain. She climbed onto his back. He wrapped her arms around his neck. He grunted as he took her full weight, his hands locking beneath her knees. He stood up, his legs braced, his body steady. He shifted her weight, then bent and picked up the shotgun. And then he began to walk. He walked north, into the broken lands, carrying her. He did not seem to slow. His pace was steady, rhythmic. She could feel the power in his back, the muscles working beneath his skin. She buried her face in his shoulder, shivering, overwhelmed by the pain, the cold, and the sheer, stark fact of him. He was carrying her into the wilderness to save her life. He carried her for miles. She lost track of time. The sun rose, high and hot, baking the wet clothes to their skin, then drying them stiff. Her ankle throbbed with every step he took. She must have drifted in and out of consciousness, because the sun was westering when he finally, gently, let her down. He set her in the shade of a crumbling, high wall. "Where are we?" she whispered, her throat raw. "San Esteban," he said. He looked at the ruins around them with a cold, deep sadness. "A mission. The Spanish built it. Then the soldiers used it. A fort." It was a place of ghosts. The roof of the church was gone, the massive wooden beams lying in a charred, fallen heap. The adobe walls were crumbling, pockmarked with bullet holes from some long-forgotten fight. An iron cross, rusted and bent, leaned crookedly in what had once been a courtyard. "They held my people here," Taza said, his voice flat, emotionless. "Before they marched them to the reservation. This is a place of great sorrow. No one comes here." He found a dry, sheltered corner, a room that had once been a barracks, and made her comfortable. He tore a long strip from his own blanket and, using the last of their good water, soaked it and wrapped her swelling ankle. It was already turning a dark, mottled purple. "We will stay," he said. "Until you can walk. They will not look for us in this place. The white man fears his own ruins. And my people, they will not come here. Too many spirits." They were safe. But they were trapped. The mission, with its weight of sorrow, pressed down on them. That night, sleep was not a refuge. It was a place of memory. Clara dreamed. She was not in the mission, but in the stiff, formal parlor of her father's house in Ohio. She was 16. Her father, a stern man with a face like a closed ledger, stood with his hand on her shoulder. His grip was tight, pinching. "She is a good girl, Mr. Reeves," her father was saying. "Obedient, strong stock. She will give you no trouble." Martin Reeves, younger but with the same heavy face and small, greedy eyes, looked her over. He was inspecting her. "She looks a bit frail." "She is not," her father said sharply. "And my business dealings are not. The dowry is generous. She will make a fine wife." He was trading her. He was selling his daughter like a bolt of cloth, like a head of cattle. The dream shifted. Her mother, a pale, nervous woman who smelled of lavender water, was dabbing at a bruise on Clara's arm. Clara had spoken up at dinner, and her father had gripped her arm. Hard. "You must not." "Clara," her mother whispered, her eyes darting to the closed parlor door. "Men are as they are. They are. Louder than us. A woman's strength is in her silence. You bear it. You do not argue. You survive. That is how you survive." Clara woke with a gasp, her heart hammering. The smell of cold dust and charred wood filled her nose. Taza was beside her, his hand on her good arm. "You dreamed," he said. It was a statement. "My mother," Clara whispered, the shame of the memory choking her. "She taught me to be silent. She taught me to let them, to survive by not living at all." Taza's gaze was steady in the moonlight. "The elders teach us to listen to the world. Your mother taught you to be deaf to yourself." He lay back, but he did not sleep. An hour later, she heard him. A low moan, a guttural sound. He was thrashing, his hands clenched. "No!" he shouted, his voice sharp with terror. "Cale, the horses! Fire! The fire!" Clara, ignoring the searing pain in her ankle, dragged herself to him. She put her hand on his chest. It was slick with cold sweat. "Taza," she said, her voice firm. "Taza, wake up! It is me! It is Clara!" His eyes flew open. For a terrible second, they were black, empty, and wild. He did not see her. He saw an enemy. His hands shot out and clamped around her throat. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She held his gaze. "Taza, it is me." The wildness in his eyes receded. Recognition dawned. He saw who he was holding. He let go as if his hand had been burned. Scrambling back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I, he stammered. Horrified, he stared at his own hand. I did not see you. It is all right, she whispered, rubbing her throat. You were dreaming. You were in the fire. He turned away from her, his broad back rigid with shame. The smell, he choked out. The smell of burning horsehair, it never leaves. The soldiers, they raided our camp. At dawn, they shot the horses first, all of them, so we could not flee. They shot them, and then they burned them to send a message. He was shaking. My brother, Cale. He was young. He was brave. He ran out, tried to cut the horses loose. He loved his pony. He stopped, unable to go on. The memory of war, of blood, of the terrible, sickening smell of burning animals, had broken him. Clara pulled herself to him. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her face against his scarred, trembling back. We are here, she whispered, her voice fierce. We are not there. That is a ghost. We are here. He did not speak, but he reached back, his hand finding hers, his fingers lacing with hers, his grip so tight it hurt. They stayed in the ruined mission for 4 days. Her ankle began to heal. The deep purple faded. The swelling lessened. Taza hunted. He was silent, efficient. He brought back 2 rabbits and, once, a small desert snake, which he roasted over a tiny, smokeless fire. It tasted of chicken, and it was hot, and it was life. The shared nightmares, the terror of his and the shame of hers, had forged a new bond. They were stripped bare. There were no more secrets to hide. On the 3rd day, she was able to limp around the courtyard, leaning on a stick he had found for her. He was sitting in a patch of sun, fletching an arrow, using a hawk feather he had found. Her hands were clumsy, still soft from her old life. She was trying to help, trying to bind a new point to a shaft, but the sinew kept slipping. I am useless, she said, frustrated, dropping the arrow. I cannot do this. You are Apache. I am just a white woman. You are not white, he said, not looking up from his work. You are not Apache. You are Clara. And you are clumsy. She was so startled by the flat, simple truth of it that she laughed. It was a short, sharp, rusty sound, as if the mechanism had forgotten how. She had not laughed, truly laughed. In years. He looked up, his face surprised. What? She asked. A smile tugging at her mouth. A small, slow smile touched the corner of his own. It changed his entire face, softening the hard lines, making his eyes crinkle. You sound like a crow, he said. A small, happy crow. She laughed again, a real, bubbling laugh that echoed in the ruined courtyard. And you, she said. You look like a man who almost smiled. He smiled. A full, genuine smile. It lit him from within. It was a revelation. The tension, the fear that had hung over them, broke. It was still there, beyond the walls, but in this small, sunlit square, they were just a man and a woman. Later that afternoon, he was carving. He had a small piece of pine, and he had been working on it with the tip of his knife since they arrived. He finished, and he came to her. He held out a thin strip of leather. Hanging from it was a small, perfectly carved bird, a hawk, its wings spread wide. "'Tis," she whispered, touching it. "It is beautiful." "A hawk," he said. "It sees far. It has a strong heart. It is you." He tied the leather thong around her neck. The smooth, warm wood rested against her skin. She looked at him, her heart too full for words. She felt the tears well, but they were not tears of sorrow. She stepped close, stood on her good leg, and reached up. Her fingers traced the old, puckered scar on his chest, the bullet hole that had healed badly. She leaned in and pressed her lips to it. He closed his eyes. A shudder went through him. His hand came up, gently, and rested on the back of her head, holding her there. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of acceptance. a healing of old wounds, his and hers. But while they healed, the town of Prescott festered. On Sunday, Reverend Gale took the pulpit. His church was full. Jed Sykes sat in the front pew, his arm in a clean white sling, his face a mask of righteous fury. "The frontier is a garden," the preacher boomed, his fist striking the holy book. "A garden given to us by God Almighty. But what happens, I ask you, what happens when the serpent enters this garden? What happens when a woman, an Eve, turns from her race, from her God, and invites the serpent in?" "Amen," cried Mrs. Pruitt from the second pew. "This woman, this Clara Reeves, has become a vessel of sin." Gale's face was red, the veins in his neck bulging. "She is possessed by a foul lust, a shame that taints this entire territory. She has brought the heathen, the savage, among us." He pointed a trembling finger toward the distant mountains. "We must have a moral cleansing. We are the hand of God. It is our sacred duty to cut this cancer out, to purge the wilderness of this filth, both the savage and the one who lies with him." The air in the church was thick, hot. The men sat silent, their faces hard. This was not about justice. This was about order. Their order. After the service, they gathered outside. It was not an official posse. Marshal Brody had conveniently ridden south 2 days before to investigate a claim dispute. Jed Sykes stepped onto the mercantile porch. "The preacher is right. I seen him. She's his whore. They've run to the high country. I know that land. We can find them." A small party formed. 8 men. Jed, his arm in the sling but a pistol on his hip. Reverend Gale, his Bible in one hand and a Henry rifle in the other. Mr. Hatcher, the mercantile owner, his face grim. 5 other ranchers, all armed, all carrying extra ammunition. They were not riding for the law. They were riding for a hanging. They rode out of town that afternoon, a small, grim party, kicking up a cloud of dust that Taza, many miles to the north, would see rising on the horizon. Taza saw the plume of dust on the northern horizon 2 hours before sunset. It was thin, but it was steady. It was not a whirlwind. It was not a dust devil. It was horses. "Riders. They are coming," he said. He was standing on the high wall of the ruined mission, his body a still, dark line against the bright sky. Clara, her ankle now tightly bound and able to bear her weight for short periods, looked up from the fire. "How many?" 6, maybe 8. They ride in a bunch, angry." He turned and looked down at her. The softness was gone from his face, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. "Your ankle. It is strong enough." "It is," she said, testing it. The pain was a dull throb, no longer a spike. "I can walk." "Good. We leave. Now." "Run again?" she asked, her heart sinking. "No." He jumped down from the wall, landing silently on the packed earth. He kicked dirt over the small fire, extinguishing it. "We do not run. We go to our own ground. A man who fights in a place he does not know is already half dead. They will expect us to run west, to hide in the mountains. We will not. We go back." "Back?" she said, confused. "Back to the canyon. Back to my home." He grabbed their meager supplies. "Back to the high crevice. It has one path. It is a fortress. They will come for us, and we will be ready for them. We will not run again. Running is only a way to die tired." There was a finality in his voice that chilled her, but it also strengthened her. He was right. Running forever meant nothing. It was not a life. A stand, even a final one, was a choice. They traveled under the cover of dusk, moving southeast, backtracking on their own trail. Taza pushed her hard, but he was careful of her leg. He took most of the weight, carrying the shotgun and the blankets. When she faltered, he did not offer words of comfort, but simply put his hand on her back, a solid, unyielding pressure, urging her forward. They reached the mouth of his canyon well after midnight. The moon was high, bathing the familiar red rocks in a ghostly, silver light. It felt like a lifetime since she had first followed his moccasin tracks up the hidden path. "Here," he said, stopping at the narrow game trail. "We prepare." They did not sleep. They worked. The path to the crevice was narrow, winding between massive boulders. Taza used the next 3 hours with a terrible, silent efficiency. He showed Clara how to balance a large, flat rock on a fulcrum of smaller stones, held in place by a single piece of mesquite. A horse brushing the wood would send 100 pounds of sandstone crashing down. He set 2 of these deadfalls, not on the path itself, but on the ledges above it, aimed at the ground where riders would be forced to bunch together. "It will not kill," he said, testing the trigger. "It will break a horse's leg. It will break a man's. It will stop them." He moved further up, loosening the scree on a steep slope, creating a small, unstable rock slide that he could trigger by rolling a single boulder from above. He cached their waterskin and supplies in the cave, then took his position on a high ledge that overlooked the first turn in the trail. It gave him a clear shot with his bow, but kept him hidden from below. "You will stay in the cave," he said, his voice flat. "No," Clara said. She held the 12-gauge shotgun. "I will not. You are not a warrior. You will be safe." "You told me I am not a white woman," she interrupted, her voice just as firm. "You told me I must learn. I have learned. That man, Jed Sykes, he will come for me. I will not hide in a cave while you die for me. I will not be that woman again." He looked at her for a long moment. He saw the hawk necklace at her throat. He saw the shotgun, held steady in her hands. He saw the woman who had cried in his arms, and the woman who had kissed his scars. "Here," he said, pointing to a cluster of rocks 20 yards below his own position. "You will be covered. You will not shoot until they pass you. You will shoot the last man, not the first. I cannot kill a man." "Taza, do not kill," he said. "Wound. Aim for the legs. A man who is screaming is worth 3 men who are dead. He takes another man to help him. He breeds panic. Do not shoot until I do." She nodded, her throat dry. She took her position, her back against the cold stone, the heavy shotgun resting on her knees. The eastern sky began to bleed with the first pale light of dawn. The world was utterly, profoundly silent. The silence was worse than the running. It was a silence that waited. They sat in the quiet for what felt like an eternity. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. Clara, her heart a cold knot in her chest, whispered into the quiet. "Taza?" His voice came from the rocks above her, so close he might have been beside her. "I am here. If we live, after this, what will you do?" The silence stretched. She thought he would not answer. "I will find land," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "High country, near water. I will build a house, not a white man's house, not a wickiup. A house of stone, a house that will last." He paused, and his voice, when he spoke again, was rough with an emotion she had never heard from him. "That is what I want. Land, a roof, and your voice. Every morning." Clara closed her eyes, tears burning. She had never been given a future before. Now, one was laid before her, simple and beautiful, just as the men who wanted to destroy her were riding into the canyon. She gripped the shotgun, the wood smooth against her palms. "Then we will live," she whispered. She heard it first, the clink of a horseshoe on stone, a low curse, a man's cough. They were in the canyon. "Stay still." Taza's voice came, as calm as the stone itself. "Wait." She peered through a gap in the rocks. She saw them, 8 men. Jed Sykes was in the lead, his arm in its sling, his face a mask of rage. Behind him, she saw the preacher, Reverend Gale, his rifle held across his saddle, his eyes scanning the rocks. Mr. Hatcher was there, and 5 other men she recognized from town. They were a grim, determined posse, their faces hard. "He's here," Jed called out, pointing to the tracks at the base of the trail. "The bastard led us right to his hole. He's up there, with her." "Spread out," Hatcher yelled. "Watch the high ground." They started up the path, their horses nervous, sensing the narrow, high walls. They were clumsy, loud. They reached the first deadfall. The lead horse, A big roan brushed the trigger branch. The world exploded. The crash of falling rock was deafening, echoing like a cannon shot. The roan screamed, a high, terrible sound, as its front legs crumpled under the weight of the sandstone. The rider, a ranch hand Clara didn't know, was thrown clear, landing hard against the canyon wall. "Ambush!" Jed roared, trying to control his own terrified horse. At that exact moment, an arrow hissed from the rocks above. It struck Jed's horse in the rump. The animal went mad, rearing, bucking, and slamming Jed against the canyon wall, before collapsing, its leg broken in the fall. Chaos. The men were yelling, trying to dismount as their horses panicked. Taza's first trap had taken out 2 horses and 1 man, blocking the path. "He's up there!" Hatcher yelled, firing his rifle at the ledge where he thought the shot had come from. The bullet ricocheted, whining harmlessly. Another arrow. This one took the preacher's horse in the neck. It gurgled and fell, pinning Gale's leg. "My leg! God help me! My leg is broken!" the preacher shrieked, his piety vanishing in a wave of pain and terror. The men were on foot now, scrambling for cover, firing their rifles and pistols wildly at the rocks. "Spread out! Get above him!" Jed ordered, pulling himself free of his dead horse. He had his pistol in his good hand. "Hatcher, flank him left. Abe, you come with me. Find the whore." 3 men, led by Hatcher, scrambled up the rocks to the left. Jed and another man, Abe, came up the main path, using the boulders for cover. Clara's heart was in her throat. They were coming. Taza loosed another arrow, catching one of Hatcher's men in the shoulder. The man screamed and tumbled back down, but Jed and Abe were closer. They were below her, moving fast. "He's pinned down!" Jed yelled. "She's in the cave. Get to the cave." Abe, a big man from the livery, saw the cluster of rocks where Clara was hiding. He must have thought it was the path to the cave. He broke cover, running, his rifle raised. He was 10 yards from her. He was going to pass her. He did not see her. "Now," she whispered to herself. He ran past. His back was to her. She stood up. "Abe!" He spun, his eyes wide with shock. He saw her, the shotgun, his face a mix of fear and rage. He brought his rifle up. Clara pulled both triggers. The roar of the 12-gauge was deafening in the narrow space. The kick slammed her back against the rock, bruising her shoulder. Abe did not fall. He screamed, dropping his rifle, and grabbed his right leg. The buckshot had torn his thigh to pieces, from knee to hip. He collapsed, writhing, a dark, arterial spray painting the rocks. "He shot me! The bastard shot me!" He howled, not even realizing it was her. Jed Sykes, just below, heard the shot. He saw Abe on the ground. He looked up and saw her, standing in a cloud of blue smoke, the shotgun empty in her hands. "You," he breathed, "you filthy, murdering whore." He raised his pistol. An arrow struck his gun hand. It went straight through the meat of his palm, pinning his hand to the wooden stock of his own pistol. He screamed, a high, thin sound of agony, and dropped the useless, heavy weapon. Taza was there. He dropped from the ledge above like a hawk, landing silently between Jed and Clara. He held his knife. Jed scrambled back, his face white, his eyes wide with a terror that went beyond the fight. He was looking at something that was not human to him. "Stay back, savage!" he panted, clutching his ruined hand. Taza advanced, his movement slow, deliberate, flowing. He was not angry. He was cold. He was judgment. "You came to my home," Taza said, his voice a low growl. "You came to hurt my woman. You are the sickness." Jed's bravado was gone. He was a coward, cornered. He tried to run, scrambling back down the path. Taza was on him in 2 strides. He kicked the back of Jed's knee, and the man collapsed. Taza put the knife to his throat. "Please," Jed wept, tears of pain and terror tracking through the dirt on his face. "Please, God, don't. I'll leave. I'll never come back." "God is not here," Taza said. "I am." He looked at Clara, who was watching, her face pale, her hands shaking as she held the empty shotgun. He looked back at Jed, at the pathetic, blubbering man who had caused all this. He saw the man who had struck her, who had torn her dress, who had led a lynch mob to her home. He pressed the knife harder. "Stop!" The voice was not Clara's. It was loud, carrying authority. Marshal Brody stood at the bottom of the path, his rifle leveled. Behind him were 6 more men, townsmen, but these wore worried, grim faces. They were not a lynch mob. They were the law. "Let him go, Apache," Brody ordered. "This is over." Taza held the knife steady. He looked at the marshal, then at the men behind him. Reverend Gale, who had been freed from his horse, saw his audience. "Marshal, thank the Lord," he cried, his voice thick with pain and false piety. "You've caught him? This savage. He and that woman. They laid a trap. They've murdered these men. They shot Abe. They tried to kill us all." "He's lying." Clara's voice was sharp, clear, and it cut through the preacher's wail. It echoed from the rocks. She walked down from her position, her limp obvious, the empty shotgun still in her hands. She stood beside Taza. "They are all lying," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Not fear. Jed Sykes." She pointed at the man on his knees. "And Silas Croft attacked me, at my own cabin, 2 weeks ago." The new townsmen looked at each other. They had heard those rumors. "They threw me against the wall," Clara continued, her voice ringing. "Jed tore my dress. He said he was going to teach me a lesson. They were going to rape me." A sick silence fell over the canyon. Mrs. Pruitt's whispers were one thing. This was a public accusation. "Taza saved me," she said, her hand resting on Taza's arm. "He did not kill them. He wounded them and he left. I lied to you, Marshal, to protect him, because I knew you would not believe me. You would not believe an Apache over 2 white men." "Lies," Gale shrieked. "Slander. She is a harlot, possessed." "Then ask him," Clara said, her voice dropping, cold and hard. She pointed at Jed, who was still kneeling, Taza's knife at his throat. "Ask him what he wrote on the wall of my cabin before they burned it to the ground." Jed's eyes were squeezed shut. He was sobbing. "He led these men here," Clara said, her gaze sweeping over the new arrivals. "Not for justice, but because I would not let him rape me. He called me a whore, so he tried to make me one. When I fought, he decided to kill me." She looked at Marshal Brody. "That is the truth. So help me God." The marshal looked at Jed's pathetic, weeping form. He looked at the wounded men, groaning on the trail. He looked at Reverend Gale, his face purple with rage. And he looked at Clara, her face bruised but her eyes clear, standing beside the Apache who still had not moved. Brody lowered his rifle. "Taza," he said, his voice quiet. "Let him go. He's not worth the blood." Taza looked at Jed, his face filled with a profound, cold disgust. He pulled the knife away and shoved the man's face into the dirt. "Kneel," he had said. And the man had. Brody walked up the path, stepping over the wounded men. "Get these men back to town," he ordered his deputies. "All of them, Mr. Sykes and Mr. Hatcher. They'll be in my custody. The rest can see the doctor." He stopped in front of Clara. He looked at her, then at the burned-out shell of her cabin, visible in the distance. He was a tired man, and this was a complicated, ugly business. "Your husband, Martin Reeves, filed on this claim," he said, his voice formal. "But he is dead. You have no children. By law, the claim should revert to the territory." Clara's heart sank. "But," he continued, "you stayed. You worked it. And today, you defended it, against men from my town." He sighed. "This is a hard land. It doesn't care about paper. It cares about who is strong enough to hold it." He took off his hat. "As of this day, this claim is yours, Mrs. Reeves, 160 acres. I'll file the papers myself. It is yours alone, no longer your husband's." Clara felt the tears she had held back finally fall. It was the first time in her life she had owned anything. The marshal turned to Taza. His face hardened. I will not arrest you for what happened here. This was a vigilante mob, and you defended yourself, And Mrs. Reeves. He put his hat back on. But you are Apache. You are not welcome in this territory. The army, the townsfolk. They see you. They will shoot. I cannot protect you. The law does not see you. You must leave by sunset. If you are here tomorrow, I will have to hunt you. Clara's newfound hope turned to ash. No, she said. It is the only way, ma'am, Brody said, not unkindly. He turned and walked away, his deputies already starting the grim work of hauling the wounded vigilantes down the trail. The canyon was quiet again. Jed was taken away, his face still in the dirt. The wounded were carried off. Soon, it was just Taza and Clara, alone on the path, surrounded by the signs of the fight. He is right, Taza said. He was looking at the mountains to the west. No, she said, grabbing his arm. I am leaving with you. He said the land is mine. I will sell it. We can go, California, anywhere. I will not stay here without you. I told you, I won't live if I leave you. He turned to her. His face was soft again. The warrior gone. He touched the hawk necklace at her throat. His fingers were gentle. No, he said, his voice low, firm. You will not run again. You have a home now. You have a name. Your name. I will not have you be a fugitive, sleeping in ruins, hunted like me. But, Taza, I want to build something, he said, his eyes holding hers, his gaze fierce with his promise. A house of stone, here, where you are safe. This is your land. I will not be the one to make you leave it. The seasons turned. The high, sharp winds of autumn gave way to the deep, heavy silence of winter in the high country. They had left her claim. The one Marshal Brody had given her. The paper was meaningless. The land was tainted with blood and hate. Brody's law ended at the edge of town. The hatred of men like Sykes and Gale did not. There could be no safety there. Taza had led her north, into the foothills of the White Mountains. He led her to a place he had known since he was a boy, a hidden canyon with a high, clear spring. Here, on land that belonged to no one, on land the maps ignored. He had kept his promise. He built their house. It was not a cabin of brittle wood. It was a house of stone, built into the south-facing slope of the canyon, half buried in the earth. The walls were thick, 2 feet thick, of stacked dry stone he had gathered from the scree slopes. The roof was made of heavy pine logs, salvaged from a forest fire miles away, covered with brush and a foot of sod. It was invisible from 100 yards away. It was a fortress. It was a home. They had spent the winter there, isolated, buried in snows so deep the world vanished. They had only themselves. The silence was not the silence of Clara's old life, the empty, cold silence of fear. It was a shared quiet, full and warm. They survived on the dried meat Taza had prepared, and on the small animals he snared, and on the strength of each other. When the snows melted, the world turned green. Spring came to the high country with a fierce, sudden beauty, and with it, their new life truly began. He taught her to ride. He had found 2 mustangs in a box canyon, a mare and a gelding. He did not break them, as Martin would have, with ropes and spurs and cruelty. He gentled them, spending days, then weeks, just being near them, his patience as solid as the mountain, until they accepted his touch, then his weight. He taught Clara to ride bareback. The saddle is a cage, he told her, his hands on her waist as he helped her onto the mare's warm, solid back. It separates you. You must feel the horse, feel his muscles, think where he will go, and be there with him. She was afraid at first. It felt too high, too unsteady. She gripped the coarse mane, her knuckles white. Do not fight him, Taza said, his voice calm, standing at the mare's head. You are not his master. You are his partner. Be like the water. Let him be the stone. Flow with him. She fell. Many times. She fell in the soft dirt. The air knocked from her lungs, embarrassed and angry. And each time, he was there, his hand offered, pulling her up. Again, he would say. Then one day, she did not fight. She let her body move with the horse. She felt the powerful rhythm, the surge of muscle. She loosened her grip. She balanced. The mare trotted, and Clara moved with her. Taza nodded, and in one fluid motion, swung himself onto the gelding. "Come," he said. He touched his heels to the horse, and it sprang forward, not into a gallop, but a long, ground-eating lope. Clara's mare followed. Clara did not panic. She leaned forward. She gripped with her legs, and she flowed. The wind whipped her hair from its braid. The clean, pine-scented air filled her lungs. She was flying. She was free. For the first time in her life, she felt a joy so sharp and pure it made her shout. Taza looked back, and his rare, slow smile lit his face. In the long evenings, by the light of the fire in their stone house, she taught him. She had brought one book from a ruined cabin, her old, tattered copy of Pilgrim's Progress. It was the only book she had. "This is a bee," she said, her finger on the page. Taza stared at the black mark, his brow furrowed. "It is a shape. It means nothing." "It means a sound," she said patiently. "But, like bear, like book." He was frustrated. He was a man who could read the turning of a leaf, the track of a spider on stone, the intention of a cloud. But this paper was dead. "Why?" he asked one night, pushing the book away. "Why do I need this? These are the white man's marks. They are paper lies. They are the treaties that steal our land. They are the warrants that hunt me." "That is exactly why," she said softly, taking his hand. "I want you to see the lie. I want you to read the paper that hunts you, and know it, and be smarter than it. It is a weapon. Taza, for me, it was a prison. For you, it can be a weapon." He looked at her, at the earnest, fierce hope in her eyes. He picked the book back up. He pointed. "This one, again." He learned. His mind was sharp, and once he understood the pattern, he devoured it. He learned the words: hill, man, afraid, home. They grew. The land near the spring was rich. Taza showed her the way of his mothers, the three sisters. They planted corn, and as it grew, they planted beans that climbed the stalks, and around them, they planted squash, whose broad, flat leaves shaded the ground, holding in the precious moisture. Their small patch of green in the high wild canyon was a defiant, living thing. It was their future, growing from the earth. Clara felt the change in her body before she even missed her monthly course. It was a weariness, a tenderness, a sickness in the morning that sent her to the spring to retch. Martin's voice, a cold ghost from her past, whispered in her ear. Barren, a cold, barren wife. Useless. She had believed him. For years, she had believed she was broken, that her body was as empty as her life. One afternoon, she was weeding the squash, the sun hot on her back, and the sickness rose. She went to the shade of a pine tree, her hand resting on her lower belly. It was no longer flat, it was firm. There was a fullness there, a tightness that was new. It was not sickness, it was life. She was not barren. She was carrying a child, a wave of fear, so cold it made her gasp, washed over her. A child? Here? In this world? A child that would be hunted? A child that would belong nowhere? How could she? Taza found her there. He came back from a hunt, a young buck over his shoulders, and saw her sitting, her face pale, her eyes wide with a terror he had not seen since the fight in the canyon. He dropped the deer. He was at her side in an instant, his knife in his hand, his eyes scanning the ridges. "What is it? Who is here?" "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No one. It is—" She could not say it. She just looked at him, her eyes flooding with tears, and she took his calloused, blood-stained hand and placed it on her belly. He froze. His gaze dropped from her face to her stomach. He did not understand, not at first. He felt the firm roundness. He looked back at her. "Taza," she whispered, her voice breaking. I am with child." He did not speak. He did not move. He knelt before her, his hand still on her, his expression unreadable. She could not tell if it was rage or fear or joy. "I am sorry. she cried, believing his silence was anger. I did not know. Martin always said. He cut her off, his other hand coming up to gently, fiercely, cover her mouth. Do not, he said, his voice low, rough. Do not say his name here. This is not his. He took his hand from her mouth and placed it over his own, which was still on her belly. He closed his eyes. He was not angry. He was anchoring himself. This was real. This land, this house, this woman, this child. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. He said nothing. He simply breathed with her, his hands holding the new life, a silent, powerful vow. The summer grew deep and hot. The nights were a blessed relief, the high desert air cooling quickly, the stars so thick they looked like spilled salt. Clara was heavy now, her body changing, growing. They lay on their blankets inside the stone house. The door opened to the night, the sound of the crickets, a soft, steady song. They lay skin to skin, her back pressed against his chest, his arm around her, his hand resting on the tight, high curve of her belly. He could feel the child move, a kick, a flutter. Clara sighed, a sound of pure contentment, and she shifted, turning in his arms to face him. She loved this time, the quiet, the dark, the safety. She traced the old, puckered scar on his chest, the bullet hole that had healed so badly. Taza, she whispered, I am here. Do you remember that night? She asked, her voice soft. In the first cave, during the storm, when I was so afraid. He was quiet for a moment, his hand moving from her belly to her hair, his fingers brushing the fine strands away from her face. I remember. Do you remember what I asked you? He looked at her, his eyes dark, deep, reflecting the faint starlight from the doorway. He remembered the broken, terrified woman who had been stripped bare, her voice a thread of sound. Will it hurt, or will you go slow? A slow, gentle smile touched his mouth, a smile that was only for her. He leaned in. He did not kiss her mouth. He pressed his lips to the side of her neck, just below her ear, his breath warm against her skin. I remember. He whispered against her. And I remember what I knew, even then. He pulled back, just enough to meet her eyes. You were never meant to hurt. Tears welled, but they were not the tears of that night. They were not tears of pain, or fear, or shame. They were tears of release. She had been born into a world that had tried to break her. Her father, her husband, the town. But this man who the world called a savage, had seen her, truly seen her, and he had refused to let her be broken. She lay her head on his chest, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. She thought of the child inside her. The world would have names for this child, half-breed, half-caste, savage. It would belong nowhere. It would be caught between, just as Taza had been. She dreamed of a different future, a future where this child was not defined by blood, not by what it was half of, but by what it was whole of. It would be a child of the stone house, a child of the high canyon, a child of a love that had been forged in violence and secrecy. She dreamed of a story that began with love, not with blood, but she knew the world was still there. The dream was fragile. The stone house was their sanctuary, but it was also their hiding place. They were not naive. They knew the peace was stolen, not given. They still carried rifles. Taza's bow was always strung. Clara's shotgun, the one she had fired at Abe, was always clean and loaded, leaning just inside the door. When Taza hunted, he also scouted. He spent hours on the high ridges, his eyes not on the deer, but on the distant valleys, watching for the thin, rising plumes of dust that meant riders. He watched for the glint of sun on a rifle barrel. Clara practiced with the bow. She practiced with the shotgun. She was a mother protecting her home. She was a hawk, as he had named her. She was alert. They knew the world was harsh. They knew it did not forgive. They knew that love, especially a love like theirs, did not ask for permission. They carried one another through the deep, binding silence of the winter. through the sudden, violent storms of summer, through the ghosts of their pasts, and they carried one another through all the slow, healing, patient fire of a love that had found them in the darkness. The nights grew cold again. The first snows had already dusted the high peaks. The fire in the hearth was the center of their home, a warm, bright heart in the stone body of the house. Clara sat on the blankets, her back against the wall, her body heavy, the baby due any day. She was mending one of Taza's shirts, her fingers slow, clumsy, but steady. Taza was at the fire. He was adding a log, a thick piece of dry juniper. He knelt, his back to her, and the flames leaped up, throwing his shadow, tall and strong, against the stone wall. The firelight played on the dark skin of his shoulders, the hard line of his back. He was so solid, so real. He was the wall that kept the wind out. He was the fire that kept the cold at bay. He had been a ghost in the trees. He had been a terror on the path. He had been a gentle stranger in a cave. Now, he was her husband. He was her home. She whispered his name. He turned, the firelight casting warm, flickering shadows on his face. "You went slow," she said, her voice soft, full of all the months, all the lessons, all the nights. "You stayed." He came to her. He did not walk. He flowed, silent as he always was. He knelt before her, his large, warm hands coming to rest on her belly, on the new life they had made, a life that was moving, restless, ready. He looked into her eyes, his own reflecting the fire, reflecting her. He leaned his forehead against hers, a familiar, intimate gesture. He was the anchor. He was the vow. Always. Thank you so much for listening to this story. My name is, and it has been my deepest pleasure to share this journey with you. I am always curious to know where these stories land. So, in the comments, please, let me know where in the world you are listening from. If you enjoyed this story, and you want to hear more tales of love, grit, and survival, please consider subscribing to From Wild West. And finally, share your thoughts in English. What did you feel? What did Clara and Taza's journey mean to you? Your thoughts are the fire I warm my hands by. Thank you.